I'm Cole Peterson. I'm the owner of this place, Caravan, the Tiny House Hotel. It's the first tiny house hotel probably in the world, definitely in the United States. So we started this business back in 2013 under the notion that we were going to provide a new hotel on this street that needed it, but also be able to kind of promote small housing. We wanted to give a place for people to actually try out living in a tiny house before they made that huge radical downsizing commitment. And this is a really great platform to kind of do that form of subtle education. We've had over 10,000 people stay here. People who didn't know about tiny houses before they came here oftentimes are like, wow, I could live in a smaller space. And a lot of people think they want to live in a tiny house and realize they don't want to, and that's fine too. I think tiny houses are really cool, and I think they play a role. But I think from my vantage, the bigger thing that we're doing is kind of influencing people to think about, do I really need to live in a 2,500 square foot house? That's kind of the ultimate, mission, I guess you could say. My wife and I live in what's called an accessory dwelling unit, which is a secondary housing unit on a single family lot, small house in the backyard cottage. And we designed and built that ADU back in 2010, moved into it when it was done in 2011. We've been living in that ever since. For me, one of the major motivations behind wanting to build and live in that space was because the single most significant thing an individual can do to reduce their climate footprint, carbon footprint, energy footprint is to reduce the size of the structure in which they live. And that's because heating and cooling, HVAC, is the single biggest energy hog in our residential structures. So we built that and kind of got really interested in small housing in general. My wife has a long background of living in funky, small, alternative structures, garages and yurts and weird places like that. We're eyeing this empty lot, which was a repo lot 5 years ago. And this was before there was HGTV shows on it about tiny houses. So tiny houses were known, but they weren't quite the phenomena that they've since become. We kind of came up with the idea of a tiny house hotel. What we've done with Caravan is created a urban design example of what a tiny house community might look like. It's not actually a tiny house community. People don't live here full time. Our goal is to kind of feature the most interesting, diverse, beautiful tiny houses we can get our hands on here. They're all built in the Pacific Northwest. There's Rosebud, which is 120 square feet. It was built in Salem, Oregon by a guy named Hal. Then we have Tandem, which is 160 square feet, sleeps 4 people. We call it Tandem because it has bike parts as art integrated into the architecture of the structure, as well as having 2 beds. Then we have Caboose, which looks like a train caboose, sleeps 4 people, it has 3 beds in it. Pacifica, which was built by Abel Zill of Zillvardos out of Olympia, Washington. And one of the design challenges for this one that he built for us was we wanted to make basically an ADA compliant tiny house, one of the first that we know of. We have a wheelchair ramp that we store beneath the tiny house, and then people who are in wheelchairs can access the tiny house. Then we have Skyline, which is 160 square feet. It's 100% salvaged. It was built locally here by a friend of ours who takes scrap metal off of trucks and creates art out of it. Skyline has interesting features such as a triangular toilet that's placed over the trailer tongue, so it utilizes the space over the trailer tongue, which no other tiny houses do. And then we have Kanga Blue, which is our most elegant tiny house. It's 170 square feet. It's 21 feet long. It has a blue pine interior. It was built by our Australian friend, Ben. So those are our 6 tiny houses. Each of them have a little different feel to it. We wanted to go on a camping trip across Canada in a teardrop trailer, and we found out there was none to rent in the entire Pacific Northwest. We started up a teardrop trailer rental business for people to come and take a teardrop trailer and go camping. And these are, unlike tiny house on wheels, which are 7,000 pounds and actually quite difficult to tow on the road. Teardrop trailers are extremely lightweight. Any vehicle with a hitch can tow a teardrop trailer. They weigh 900 pounds. The tongue weight is 80 pounds. They don't have a bathroom, but they have everything else. What we have right now in most cities is not affordable housing. Anything that you have to do to building code is going to be by virtue of the fact that you have to meet all these building codes, quite expensive to do. The codes aren't written with a poor intention. The accidental result of that is lack of affordable housing. And you could say the same thing about planning zoning codes. The planning zoning codes are basically saying we don't want homelessness happening really anywhere, but we won't let it happen in residential neighborhoods. And as a result, it happens in the underbelly of cities, in places that might not be the best places for people to be sleeping. It's a bunch of accidental impacts that happen as a result of mindless regulations that you don't really get to understand until you see the results of it. But there isn't really a lot of conversation going on about this issue and how we can tweak our zoning codes within residential areas and our building codes to potentially allow for more affordable housing that is, by the way, actually more efficient. The realistic way to get at small housing right now is to fix your codes pertaining to accessory dwelling units. So working on that front is a good idea, and that's something I do consulting about. If people are interested, I'm going to be coming out with a book pretty soon to help people who want to advocate for better ADU codes. And I also run a website called accessorydwellings.org, all about accessory dwelling units and the best practices about them. Then on the other front, the way I think about it is everything else that isn't permanent residential structures, i.e. tiny houses on wheels, vans, campers, travel trailers, yurts, in my mind all has to fall under like a camping code. I think it would be cool for some cities to start to think about whether there's ways that they could allow for camping on residential properties. Perhaps the provision is that the occupant of the non-permanent structure has to be able to gain access to the kitchen and bathroom in the primary residence in order to be able to legally camp there. They have to do it under a permitted program, so the homeowner could get a 1-year provisional permit that allows for people to camp on the property. And I think there could be this whole new kind of housing economy that could sprout up if that legal structure could be started. I'm sure it would come with a lot of different interesting questions and conversations, but ultimately the goal would be to provide more affordable housing in places where people want to live and they can't afford to. If you want to come to Portland, try to reserve a room way in advance because we get booked out months in advance at this point. If you're interested in building an accessory dwelling unit, check out accessorydwellings.org and maybe consider coming to Portland next time we run a citywide ADU tour. We're going to run the next one in September of 2017. So that'll be the next big opportunity. It's the biggest small housing tour in the country, and it's actually sponsored by the city, state, and governmental entities in Oregon.
Thanks for watching this week's film. If you want access to more content like behind the scenes videos and Q&As, things of that nature, head over to the Patreon page, patreon.com/Dylan Magaster, and help support the channel and also get access to those kinds of things. Links to everything that Cole mentioned, as well as the Patreon page and my social medias, are down below if you're interested in any of that. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.